again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2019. This is the day 14. I actually had this. Excuse me. I had this video planned uh, yesterday, but something happened that I'm still not 100% sure what it was. But I was having chest pains and was having trouble breathing for like 5 or 6 hours. So I decided to just call it a day and go to bed really early. Um, so yeah, now you get it today, and I'm again a day behind. Um, but today, um, I this specific video is actually inspired kind of by my last uh, uh, daily December, where I talk about, you know, it's tangentially related to Geek and Sundry's downfall, quote unquote, simply because it reminded me of another video that I actually tried to make a while ago. To be honest, I want to see if I still have a date on. Yeah, probably about 8-ish months ago. I tried to make this. Um, and it's it's a bit of a complicated topic, and it involves uh, not really calling out people that I admire, because I'm not going to use any names or anything like that. And I'll do my best not to give any examples that point to specific people or groups or anything. But it does talk about a trend that I've seen, not only gaining momentum and just use in the tabletop community, but I've also seen some people praising it, not quite understanding how negative it is. So with all that stuff, it makes it kind of hard to talk about. And the last time I tried to make this video, I just had an argument with someone where they basically just told me I didn't know what I was talking about. I was overreacting. I didn't understand what was being done, and they just dismissed all of my issues with what they were doing, without even attempting to understand why it was I was so adamant that this is wrong. So without beating around the bush anymore, the basics of this is mental illnesses are not character quirks that you can add to your RPG characters to make them more interesting. They are illnesses. They are disorders. They disrupt your life in a very, very negative way. And adding them to your D&D characters or whatever else system you're using is insulting and belittling to people that actually have to struggle with them for a number of reasons. the first and most obvious, because I see this all the time, and even the D&D itself actually has a mechanic that they used into Out of the Abyss, which was the, I believe, third season of the D&D Adventures League, and it was the third book storyline for fifth edition. They had this thing called Madness, which back then I thought was actually a really cool system. And a lot of it really is, because the madness there is actually done pretty well. If you get infected with a short-term madness or a long-term madness, it's not just a little character quirk that makes your character more fun to play. It is a debilitating condition that causes issues. However, the I guess cardinal sin that they broke when implementing it is in the media. Mental illnesses are portrayed incredibly incorrectly. To give you some examples, there is a brilliant movie called A Beautiful Mind. Russell Crowe plays a real mathematician in it, and I believe it was either nominated or won an Academy Award, at least one. And throughout, spoiler alert for this, like 15 or 20-year-old movie. But in the movie, there's this character played by, now I can't remember his name. He plays Vision in the Marvel movies, cinematic universe. Anyway, he acts as Russell Crowe's roommate and friend through most of the movie. You find out at the end of the movie, he's a hallucination. He's not real. And the reason Russell Crowe was hallucinating this person was the character has schizophrenia. Now, a lot of people hear schizophrenia and they think, oh, I used to have schizophrenia, or I have schizophrenia, and so do I. Because a lot of people assume that schizophrenia means you have multiple personalities. That's not true. Schizophrenia, I believe I actually did a video as part of my Stopping the Stigma series on schizophrenia. I can't remember anymore. But schizophrenia does not give you multiple personalities. It doesn't. It actually doesn't make you have visual hallucinations or anything like that. What it is schizophrenia is a severe paranoia. You believe people are out to get you. It's sometimes manifests as the government is trying to get you, or some secret organization is trying to get you. You do every so often see people in movies that'll be wearing tinfoil hats and talking about, the NSA is beaming radio radiation into your brain, and the hat's the only way to protect yourself from the mind control. That is technically a slightly more accurate version of schizophrenia. You're severely paranoid. Now, schizophrenia, one of the symptoms is hallucinations. However, the hallucinations, for like 90 or 95% plus of people, are auditory. You hear voices. Now, another thing, when people hear the phrase, "Well, you hear voices," you think, well, the voices in my head are telling me to kill everyone. That's not what schizophrenic hallucinations are. A lot of times it just sounds like whispering that you can't understand. It's a lot of people whispering at you. Or sometimes it'll be very specific sounds. It's very rare that voices are actually telling people to do something, where they feel that there is this presence that's telling them to do something, and that's not a schizophrenic symptom. That's a completely different mental illness. But if you watch the media, that's what you think schizophrenia is. And this is just how it is. It's one of the reasons that people are so terrified of people with mental illnesses is these unbelievably inaccurate representations in media, and the tabletop community is falling into those exact same tropes. On the madness table, some of the madnesses were things like there was a gluttony madness. They were based off of I believe kind of like the similar idea of the 7 deadly sins. So you'd have a gluttony madness where you would just be forced to eat and eat and eat, and sometimes you would be your character would be forced to eat whatever was in front of you. So if there was decomposing rotten filth in front of you, you would eat it, despite the fact that your character didn't want. That is not 100% off from what a compulsion is, like in OCD or other mental illnesses that have compulsions. It's not that these people want to do these things. They feel compelled to do them. They don't have any choice but to do them. Things like pathological lying. They don't want to lie. They a lot of times don't even consciously choose to lie, and a lot of times they actively try not to lie. But their mental disorder, it just happens. They do it. You know, CD, it's a slightly different compulsion where they a lot of times they believe if they don't do their rituals, which is what those things are, like opening a door 7 times or something like that. It's called a ritual. If they don't complete their rituals, something bad will happen. They are 100% convinced. They don't want to. And as they start to work with people and try to get better, a lot of them know the rituals are bogus. These ideas that someone is going to get hurt or die because they didn't complete their rituals is not real. However, because of their mental disorder, they can't help but do it. They're so terrified of someone they loved dying or being maimed, and it would be their fault. And the unfortunate aspect of that is bad things happen just because, and someone with OCD will interpret that a bad thing happened because they didn't do a ritual correctly, or maybe they were working with someone and they'd finally started to break themselves of a ritual, and something bad happened when they didn't do a ritual, and it reinforces it. That's what actual mental illness is. That's what an actual compulsion is. What I see a lot in tabletop games is they take the media portrayal, something like agoraphobia. If you don't know, I have agoraphobia. It is by far one of the worst experiences I can think of, because I am so limited in what I can do. Things like if I'm hungry and we don't have any food around the house, I have to hope someone is here that can go get me food, because I can't leave my house. Not because I'm afraid of the outdoors. I actually like being outdoors. I think it's very calming and relaxing. My issue is I have panic attacks. I have very bad panic attacks that turn into seizures. If I go somewhere where I don't feel safe and I have a panic attack, I can hurt myself. I theoretically could die. So I'm not afraid of going outside. I like outside. I actually like I like going to conventions and things like that. I am just terrified of what happens when I have a seizure or I have a panic attack in a public place and I can't get somewhere safe to just write it out. I've mentioned this statistic before, but in police interactions, people with severe mental illnesses are 10 times more likely to be shot and killed than literally anyone else. And that is a terrifying thing. And the reason that is because everyone thinks people with mental illnesses are dangerous. You look at movies and TVs, the bad guys always have something wrong. And literally, almost any portrayal of someone with a mental illness, they do something dangerous. Even roles that have been praised for their portrayal of mental illness still have issues with. They still have to show them being dangerous. There's a brilliant movie that I love called Adam, where Hugh Dancy, I think, I can't remember the actor's name, but anyway, he plays a character, Adam, who has Asperger's syndrome, which is on the autism spectrum, and it's basically they have people with Asperger's have a really difficult time reading body language and nonverbal forms of communication, which is a massive part of communication in general. Very little communication is actually based on what you say, but someone with Asperger's has a much more difficult time. Another spoiler for a great movie, there's a scene where he's dating this woman, and he finds out that she lied to him in order to get him to meet her parents. She claimed that they just happened to meet in a public place, while she actually had it planned because she wanted her boyfriend to meet her parents. When Adam finds this out, his girlfriend, that I can't remember her name now, says, I'm sorry, you kept putting it off, and I just wanted you to meet them. And Adam explodes. He starts screaming, he starts hitting things, he starts yelling at her. Now, is this a completely bizarre thing for someone with Asperger's to do? Would they never do that? No, it's actually a fairly accurate portrayal of it. However, this is like an hour and a half movie, and they still had to put in a scene where the crazy person gets violent for the plot to continue. Doesn't matter that technically, yes, it theoretically can happen. In the hour and a half of this person's life, there's tons of times when they're not violent at all. And this particular character isn't violent. And it's mentioned throughout the entire movie that they're fairly calm and controlled their entire life. This was actually a very bizarre thing for them to do. But because it was a crazy person, we have to show them being violent. Even in a great movie like Adam, you still have this preconception that, well, yeah, they can be nice, but if you do something that they don't like, they'll become violent. Now, Adam didn't attack his girlfriend. He threw some stuff around. He screamed at her, things like that. But she is never in any physical danger. However, the conversation they have after that says that she did feel that she was in danger, despite the fact they didn't swing at her or anything like that. Because someone hitting things, like, if you've never been in an abusive relationship, the threat of violence is actually significantly more useful to control people than actual violence. So hitting walls, tables, things like that is actually a very common thing to see in abusive relationships, because it's terrifying. So I'm talking in circles, but that's something I hate to see in tabletop games. the person with agoraphobia that's just afraid to go outside is not real. That's not what agoraphobia is. Agoraphobia is literally fear of panic attacks. It's a common misconception, and no one ever clears it up. Somebody that has been possessed by multiple people or something like that. It's the old multiple personality disorder trope, which isn't a real thing. There is a mental illness called dissociative identity disorder, and even the psychological community is not 100% certain that dissociative identity disorder is not caused by bad therapy, where therapists will convince people to name their alters and actually create the very thing they're attempting to treat. I'm not saying that's what it is. I know there are a lot of people, not a lot, the DID is remarkably rare, but there are people in the DID community that have learned to live with their alters and things like that. I don't have DID, so I can't talk on it. I can tell you that this idea of people randomly switching between personalities isn't real. It doesn't happen like that ever, but we see it in media, we see it in tabletop games all the time, and it's insulting, and it's dangerous. So that's the first kind of cardinal sin that I'm seeing in tabletop games, is using stereotypical portrayals of mental illness instead of actually researching the mental illness and finding out how it actually works. Don't do that. That's insulting, it's belittling, and depending on the stereotype you're using, is actually dangerous for people like me that have mental illnesses. Even if I don't have a seizure, when I have a bad enough panic attack, I become nonverbal. I can't speak. I generally try to speak, but the stutter becomes so bad that I don't get anything out. And I just make strange sounds that make it sound like I'm trying to speak, but I can't. And then I also shake and jerk uncontrollably, and eventually get to the point where I'm so lost in my panic that I can't understand what other people are saying to me. The easiest way to get hurt in a police confrontation is to not listen to the officer and do things that scares the officer, like putting your hands in places that they can't see. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That saves officers' lives because bad things happen to police officers. But when I am physically incapable of understanding someone, and I look like one of the dangerous, crazy people you see on TV, where I'm jerking around and I'm saying weird things that nobody understands, and I seem completely out of it, I'm going to get shot because people don't realize I'm having a severe panic attack. And that's it. And a panic attack isn't actually dangerous. No one has ever died from a panic attack. And if I'm having a panic attack, there's very little chance I'm going to be dangerous to anyone else, especially if I get to the point where I'm nonverbal and unable to understand what people are saying. What I want to do is to find a spot where I can be alone and feel safe and curl up into a little ball and cry. That's all I want. However, what's going to happen is a police officer is going to give me commands. I'm going to ignore them. I'm going to be hugging myself and trying to calm myself down, which generally for me involves petting my legs. It's a calming, comforting thing. It's very common in psychology to watch people kind of pet themselves to subconsciously to calm themselves down. However, taking your hands and reaching them down around your waist or your pockets, even if you're doing it outside, is not a good idea when police are already on edge, and I'm going to get shot because they don't understand that I can't understand them. Now, are there police that understand mental illness? Absolutely, and there's a huge push for people that are trained in how to identify and deal with people that have mental illnesses, going to police departments and training them on all this stuff. It's very, very slow, and it's not counteracting the media perception that crazy people are dangerous. We're not. We're significantly more dangerous to ourselves than anyone else. And when we start seeing it in the tabletop community, that's the same issue. So the second big sin I see happening in the tabletop community is just kind of belittling the idea of mental illnesses in general. For example, I know of a couple different shows where characters have either declared they have PTSD or have basically the symptoms of PTSD without calling it that. And the way it manifests is, oh, well, something happens that triggers my PTSD, make a wisdom save. And if they succeed, they're perfectly fine. And if they fail, they may lose a round or two of combat. Most RPGs, a round of combat lasts anywhere between 6 to 10 seconds. So they fail, and they start experiencing a PTSD flashback that lasts 6 seconds. No. That's not how PTSD works. I have PTSD. When I was very young, I was molested by my uncle, and when I have flashbacks, I get to relive it over and over and over. It's kind of like sitting in a movie theater and watching the same clip over and over again, but being completely unable to leave your seat, to turn your head, or even close your eyes. Real Clockwork Orange kind of thing. And that's what a flashback is like. Different people experience them in different ways, but the general idea is you experience the entirety of the moment, or parts of the traumatic moment, over and over again, and they don't last a couple seconds. The experience itself generally wasn't a couple seconds. And after it's over, it doesn't mean, oh, you're perfectly fine, the flashback's over. No, you are excuse me, god damn, my throat is so dry. And even after it's over, it's not like, oh, I'm perfectly fine, flashback's over. If I have a flashback and I am a severe case, I am not the kind of default for any of my personal mental illnesses. I am on the extreme side, and so yeah. But if I have a flashback, I can't do anything for the rest of the day. Sometimes a couple of days. The only thing I can do is eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom, and then I have to. I'll spend an entire day or two in bed, or I'll be stuck in front of my computer completely incapable of even watching a TV show or something because I can't focus on anything. And the same is true about a lot of other people that haven't spent the time and put the work in to find ways to deal with their PTSD. A flashback is not something that happens, and it happens and then you're done. It is extremely debilitating, and part of PTSD is avoiding situations that you feel might cause you to have that. It's the reason I can only bathe once or twice a week, because I have flashbacks when I'm in the shower. I don't know why. I'm dealing with it with my therapist, and I think I'm on my third therapist to try and deal with it. That's how fucked up this is. And none of them have given me to another therapist because they don't think I'm working or anything. It's been, you have a very severe case. We want to give you to someone more specialized in it. So, yeah, this idea that your character can have PTSD and then not completely avoid situations where that might trigger a flashback is bonkers. That's not how PTSD works. And if you did any sort of research or to talk to people with PTSD, you might learn what it is, but they don't want to. They just want a unique way to make their character more interesting. It doesn't make your character more interesting. It's insulting. Wow. I really hope I'm not coming down with something, because my throat hurts. Anyway, so yeah, that's the other big thing, is not so much leaning into stereotypes and things like that, but simply giving them to characters and then not actually treating them the way they should be treated, which sounds the same, but in my mind is different. I don't know. My brain's not working well right now. And the final thing that just is really, really, and on that last topic, the idea of not avoiding things. Again, I'm trying not to call anyone out, because this isn't a single person or a single group. This is a systemic thing I am seeing in all of my favorite shows. Is this idea that let's give our characters mental illnesses because it'll be cool, or it'll be interesting, or it'll be fun for us to play. Is the idea of characters doing things intentionally that they know will trigger them. Someone that is terrified of water voluntarily going to a place where they could drown. Someone that's terrified of fire using exclusively fire spells. No, that would never happen. It's just insulting and belittling. And that's the thing that annoys me the most, and I'll come back to this at the end, of well-meaning people thinking that this is some sort of diversity thing or a representation thing, and it's not in any way, shape, or form. And the final kind of cardinal sin is, in these worlds, these mental illnesses are fixed. Super easy. Give a cast greater restoration. Make a wisdom save. kill a psychic monster, attack a mage that's using telepathy to do these things. You know, it's not how it works. And the interesting thing is, psychologists and therapists are actually starting to use tabletop role playing games like D&D, and sometimes D&D itself as part of therapy. People that have PTSD or schizophrenia or a lot of other things, they can create a character, and that character can deal with the things that the person can't. And just having that little bit of separation makes it easier for them to deal with the things that they haven't been. It's an incredible tool. But in order to do that, the therapists and psychologists have to actually know what the mental illnesses are, what their specific patients are dealing with, and create an entire game based around helping them get better. That is the entire purpose of the game. It's not part of a campaign to, fell an ancient god that's trying to take over the world or kill a dragon that raised your hometown. No, their entire purpose of the campaign is for them to confront the things that are challenging them. And as of right now, that's the only way I really see mental illnesses and mental disorders being portrayed in video games effectively. I understand the idea of representation, but there's a massive difference between having a non-binary character in your show and having someone with panic disorder that their panic attacks last for 6 seconds and they do nothing to avoid getting the panic attacks. Non-binary people exist, but their gender identity is not a handicap. Gay people and transgender people and all these things that we keep hearing, and people of color and people of different religions and backgrounds, all of these things that we want to see more representation, none of those are handicaps on those people. None of those intentionally make their lives more difficult, other than the fact that society is not all that great, and by not all that great, I mean pretty fucking sucky about it. Dealing with people that they don't understand. So yes, their lives are more difficult, but not because something about them is wrong. It's because society has massive issues that we haven't dealt with yet. And by putting portrayals of these people into our fantasy and into our real lives as newscasters and senators and representatives and the president eventually, that's a way to help fix society. Mental illnesses are not a character trait. They're debilitating illness. That's like saying, the world isn't real. It's representative to have someone with cancer as part of your D&D group, and having them going and adventuring, and then having their chemo right before you fight the massive dragon. That would be incredibly insulting. Oh, make your chemo check. Oh, that's a con save, right? Oh, I made it. That means I'm perfectly fine and don't throw up or lose all my hair or become incredibly weak, and I can go fight the dragon. How insulting is that? That a simple con save can somehow fix you from the fact that you are getting poison put in your body to kill tumors that are trying to kill you. And we ignore all the side effects of it because having a character that can't adventure because of their illness isn't very fun. That's what mental illness is. It's not this character trait. It doesn't make you more interesting. It is an illness. Nobody wants to have it. Nobody likes having it. I have been going to therapy for years to try and deal with it. I hate my life because of it. I get to watch everyone else doing amazing things and watching their lives grow and expand and do these incredible, wonderful things. And my world just keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And then I get to watch people on the shows that I use to find a healthy outlet to deal with my anxiety and my depression and everything else. And they're like, oh yeah, well I have PTSD, so that means, once every hour I make a wisdom save. And if I fail the wisdom save, then I can't do anything until I succeed on the wisdom save. No! Well, I get panic attacks. So every so often, if too long in combat happens, or if somebody dies in combat, I have to make an intelligence save to try and combat the bad thoughts. And if I fail it, then I have a panic attack, and all of my attacks are made with disadvantage. No! If you have a panic attack, first of all, panic attacks don't happen in life and death situations. You have actual fight or flight responses. That's how fight or flight works. The reason panic attacks suck is because you feel like you're in a life and death situation, and you're not. My panic attacks consist of permanent hypervigilance. I have hearing so great, I can hear things happening on the ground floor on the opposite side of my house, and I can hear people talking outside of my house, like 200 or 300 feet away. Don't ask me why. It's not useful, but I hear it all. Yeah, I mean, it really upsets me. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is there are well-meaning people that are saying that's inclusivity, that's representation. Doesn't it feel better for you to have a superhero who's like you? No, it doesn't. I don't want people to be like me. I want people to be healthy mentally. I don't want anyone to have panic attacks. I don't want anyone to be afraid to go outside. I don't want anyone to have to worry about someone saying something or doing something that will force them to relive the worst point of their life over and over again. Who the hell should want that? That's a horrible thing to say. But we've got this idea that if you can't see someone exactly like you in the media, then, well, that's a horrible thing, and everybody should be fired. No. Do I think, having diversity in cast is a bad thing? Absolutely not. But none of the things that I consider diverse are bad. None of them make people's lives worse. Mental illness always makes your life worse. Or at least more difficult. And I'm certain I'll have at least someone from the autism community say, well, we're not worse, we're just different. And again, I'm not going to argue that because I'm not autistic. But even autism is different than, let's say, panic disorder. Autism is autistic people view the world differently. Their brains process information differently. Um, and I would never want to demonize anyone like that. And to be perfectly honest, I actually don't have a problem with uh, autistic characters in adventuring parties and things like that, because I don't see anything. Well, depending on how severe it is, and again, I don't want to get on too bad of a sidebar for this, but I know I have friends that are autistic. They have no problem living the lives they want to live. Autism presents difficulties for them, and part of their life is learning how to deal with those difficulties. But I don't see autism as a whole as a debilitating condition, more of just a different way of existing and a different set of difficulties. Whereas depression is always bad. Anxiety is always bad. PTSD is always bad. And those are the things I'm seeing. To be perfectly honest, I don't think I've seen an autistic character in a D&D game that wasn't portrayed by an autistic player. And that would be something I would be really interested in seeing. Because nothing about autism itself prevents you from being an adventurer or anything like that. Panic disorder would put a huge problem on adventuring, because part of the diagnosis of a panic disorder is avoiding situations where you could have a panic attack. And yeah, constantly putting yourself in strange places that could cause panic attacks wouldn't quite work that way. I'm upset about this. There's so many shows I can't watch because I can't support this idea of mental illnesses are character quirks, and they make characters more believable or more interesting. No, they're illnesses. The next time you want to make a character with a mental illness, switch whatever mental illness you're thinking of with cancer. And then create the character but based around, well, my character has cancer. And see if it doesn't sound tone deaf to you. Because cancer is an illness. It is a physical illness. Generalized anxiety disorder is a mental illness, not a character quirk, not a way to make things more interesting, or a way to, learn about something you've never dealt with before. No. I don't want to see mentally ill characters. I want to see healthy characters. Or if they do have issues, I want to see them learning how to deal with them. Not by fighting monsters, but by learning to communicate better. By learning to recognize negative thought processes that cause panic attacks and depressive episodes and things like that, and challenging them. That's what mental illness is. It's not going out and fighting dragons and pretending the dragon is your own self-hatred. No, it's talking. It's a lot of talking. It's a lot of introspection. And it's a lot of retraining your brain to work in a different pattern. Anyway, that's my rant for today. Sorry if this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I apologize to anyone I have offended. unintentionally. But if you're offended because I just told you that you're not allowed to make your character schizophrenic, I mean this in the most respectful and uh, gentle way I possibly can. Fuck off. You want to know what it's like to have a mental illness, to talk to someone with a mental illness. It might actually help them. A lot of us don't get to talk to people a whole lot about our mental illness because we've been trained that we're not allowed to say anything, because as soon as people find out we have a mental illness, they're afraid we're going to hurt them. That's all for me today. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.